Okay, hey, I'm getting you a video for this coming Sunday since I won't be here, and I will not have a video for you for the following Sunday. I may add a little quick bonus information at the end of this, but nothing major that I've prepared. So anyways, 2 Timothy chapter 2, 1 through 3, and verse 17 through 19, and Jude 17 through 23. On page 131, it asks the question, what are some warning signs against false teaching? I kind of went a different direction with this. I made this up, see if it helps you or whatever. But you might be a false teacher if your messages are more emotionally driven than expositionally given. You might be a false teacher if everyone loves your positive teaching and are never convicted by it. You might be a false teacher if you are a major focus of your sermons or your people and their happiness. Or you might be a false teacher if your message stresses giving and prosperity and that you're the main one prospering. Some of these ideas are going to pop up in both 2 Peter 2 and in Jude. Some of them pop up in other scriptures that talk about false teaching. As we get into the text, I want you to notice verse 1, that the false teachers are said to have been, first of all, around in the days of the prophets, but false prophets also rose among the people, so that's a reference to the Old Testament. And I'm doing this a little bit out of order from what I had planned, so some scriptures on that. Doesn't look like I listed them. You can go to Jeremiah 5:31 and Isaiah 30:9 and 10 to get some cross references for the false teachers in the Old Testament. And then, of course, notice that the false teachers come from among them, and therefore from among the professing church. Every time you see a reference to false teachers that actually talks about them, where they came from, it seems like most of them, if not all of them, are referencing that they're coming from within the visible church. For example, Acts 20, 29, and 30, for I know this, that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Also from among yourselves, men will rise up, speaking perverse things to draw away the disciples after themselves. 1 John 2:19, they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they were of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that none of them were of us. In other words, they weren't truly of us. They weren't truly saved, but they were of us. They went out from us. They were in our congregation. Then they finally manifested themselves to be false on such a level that they went out. This is why Jesus calls false teachers wolves in sheep's clothing. Verse 2, the expression, the denying the master who bought them. This doesn't mean that these are saved people that become false teachers. That's impossible. But that the fact of the matter is Jesus' death paid the ransom for all sins. So he bought their redemption. They just never received it. Later on it says they're going to receive swift destruction. So obviously these are not believers. How do you deny Christ, or how do they deny Christ? A lot of false teachers, especially your cults, deny the deity of Christ. That's one way. All false teachers deny the true, full efficacy or effectiveness of the atonement of Christ, so they will add works, some way, shape, or form, in their message. That'll be the key to their salvation message. So they are denying the Lord that bought them. 1 John 4:2, by this you know the Spirit of God, every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God. That's an easy verse for us to read and not catch what John is saying, because we basically, even though we know it isn't true, we say Jesus Christ as if that's his name, but it's Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, the Christos. John is saying anyone who denies that Jesus is the Messiah, or anyone who confesses that Jesus is the Messiah, he's come from God. Those that deny are an antichrist, he'll say in another passage. Verse 2 links false teaching with sensuality. This is often a hand-in-hand characteristic of false teaching. The Old Testament, you had the Old Testament prostitution, temple prostitution. The New Testament, one example is the Temple of Aphrodite, which again was a temple prostitution situation. More modern day examples, if you recall David Koresh, he had many wives. Many cult leaders have done this, where they have such control over their people, they basically sexually exploit the young girls and sometimes older women within their congregation. And even other things, sensuality is usually thought of in the sexual context, but obviously they live immoral lives. They do things for the love of money and so forth. The way of truth will be maligned by and here's what happens. You get these false teachers and they get exposed and they're doing all these crazy things, but unbelievers basically will lump a lot of times evangelical, godly people in with them because again, they're coming out from us. So they see us all as basically hypocrites and so forth. Even if they know it's not true, they'll use that against us and try to make it sound like they believe we're all the same, coming out of the same pot. Verse 3, in their greed they will exploit you. We see similar warnings about the love of money and the connection of financial preaching for financial gain. 1 Timothy 6, 4 and 5, and verse 9 and 10. He is proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. Your prosperity gospel. Godliness is the means of gain. From such withdraw yourself. Verses 9 and 10, same chapter. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Let me give you a recommendation for a great book on that whole idea of exposing the prosperity gospel. Matter of fact, here it is right here. God, Greed, and the Prosperity Gospel. It's written by Costi W. Hinn, who is the nephew of Benny Hinn, the infamous Shuckster. And he actually was working with Benny Hinn as a protege, and then finally saw the error of it all, got saved, got out of it, and has written a really good book on it. And he's very gracious too in the way he does it. So I really encourage you to read that book. It'll really open your eyes. Verse 17, we see these metaphors regarding false teaching and the false teachers. They're springs without water. Remember, the Middle East is a very dry climate, as your curriculum points out. So you've got these two metaphors that basically are giving the message that they promise something they can't deliver. A spring with no water, a mist driven by the storm. That probably is describing you look out there and you see a cloud, you see a storm forming, you get excited, you need rain, and it turns out only to be a mist. We see a really good cross-reference for this idea in Jeremiah 2:13. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. You see a cistern, you want it to be able to refresh you with water, and it's got holes in it. It can't hold any water. So Jesus, who describes himself as the living water or providing living water, he's not the first to use that expression. Jeremiah does here in Jeremiah 2:13. Gloom of darkness pictures their eternal torment in hell, and actually seems to connect darkness itself as being one of the producers of pain, especially when you read Revelation 16:10, which is in the context of the judgments. It says, then the fifth angel poured out his bowl. This is one of the final judgments in the tribulation period. On the beast and his kingdom became full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues because of the pain. So here on the earth, as the Antichrist is ruling, you see one of those final judgments, and the darkness, it's not just darkness, but it's a darkness that creates terrible pain. Matthew 8:12, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We usually think of that expression as just because of the fire, and it could be, but again, we have this darkness that creates pain. Scripture, the false teachers promised them freedom. Two great references for this: Galatians 5:13, for you brethren have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh. So that's what false teachers will teach, that we're going to give you freedom, and that freedom is to live out your fleshly, sinful ways. Paul says not to do that. That's not true freedom in Galatians 5. And then Romans 6, therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body, that you should obey it in its lust. The only thing I want to say about Jude, the passage in Jude, is verse 22 and 23, because the curriculum seems to apply those references to false teachers, that you're to have mercy on false teachers, or you snatch them out of the flames of hell. But that's referring to the ones being impacted by the false teachers. He's already made it very clear that the false teachers are on their way to hell. It's the people, first of all, the Christians. Have mercy on the Christians who are confused by the false teaching, being led astray on some level by it, or maybe being disillusioned by it. You need to mercifully straighten them out. And then you have unbelievers who you're trying to aggressively rip out of the clutches of false teaching to get them saved so they don't end up in hell. I'm not going to be able to do a video for the final lesson. I wish I could, because 2 Peter 3 is awesome. I am going to say this little bonus thing. I don't have it all laid out for you in the technical ways, but if you have a really good commentary like MacArthur's or someone else's, you'll hopefully get some of this. Maybe it's in the curriculum. I don't know. I haven't even looked at the lesson. But when it starts describing the destruction of the earth in verse 10, the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. The words used there are literally describing nuclear fission. They're literally describing the separation of the atom bomb. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not teaching that God's going to destroy the earth by some man-made atom bomb. It's talking about God releasing his sustenance upon the very basic element of the atom so that it splits, and you have all the manifestations of a nuclear explosion. You've got the roar, you've got the intense heat. The word elements is a word that literally talks about the building blocks of matter, aka the atoms. The word destroyed is the Greek word luo, and it means to loose or destroy. So the elements, very literal translation, the elements or the atoms will be released or loosed, and then you have this conflagration of destruction. So again, if you want to read more about that, MacArthur's commentary will have it. Not sure who else, I'm sure others will. Maybe even the Lifeway one, I don't know, I haven't looked. But I just thought I'd throw that out there as something for that final week, that final passage. It's an amazing description that Peter gives here. And of course, it's all because God is going to give us a new heaven, new earth. And if you're in our study of heaven, we talked at length about that, because that's part of our eternity. It's a glorious hope that we have, sure hope that we have in Christ. Well, pray for me as I go on my trip, and I'll be praying for you. And I look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks.